Brilliant, thank you. So welcome for joining us. This is a webinar that's part of the Future Funding series, and we're focusing on the Levelling Up Fund this week. Just a quick thank you to Arts Council England for funding the Future Funding programme, which is allowing us to do all of this. And a quick just note to say that this session is being recorded, which is brilliant. It'll be available later on and you'll be able to share it around friends and colleagues. But if you do not wish to appear on the recording, then make sure your camera's switched off as well. We've got two really interesting speakers. We've got Andrew Laird, who's the MD of Mutual Ventures, and we've got Sam Elliott, who is head of Bolton Libraries and Museums. And they're going to be talking about the Levelling Up Fund, how libraries can work with it, and really how to position libraries within the local authorities to be able to be part of those bids. I don't really want to take up the time, so I'm going to pass straight on to Andrew. But I will say there is time for questions afterwards, and if anyone has questions in the meantime, put them in the chat. Just put a Q and then write your question, and we'll pick them up after Andrew and Sam have done their bit. So Andrew, go ahead.
Great, and many thanks. It's really good to see everybody, and you know, I hope everyone is managing to keep a grip on themselves and their lives during all of this, which I know is increasingly hard as we're in the third lockdown now. I am Andrew Laird, as Ian said. I'm the Managing Director of Mutual Ventures. We're a small consultancy that specialises in public services and trying to make them better and more sustainable and more connected to communities. And we have a particular interest in libraries. So I'm just going to share my screen. I've got some slides. Being a consultant, you would expect me to have some slides. So hopefully, is that working correctly? Great, excellent. So just very briefly, we have a very close relationship with the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, which is obviously where libraries sit within central government. We've worked with them over the years, developing a libraries toolkit, and also through something called the Mutual Support Programme. And through that, we've worked very closely, particularly with Devon Library Services and York Libraries. And we supported both of those organisations to establish themselves as independent social enterprises with elements of community ownership. So through that, we've got a really strong understanding of libraries. The model which a library is delivered through, I'm personally agnostic on. I think it needs to be something very much embedded within a community, and whether that's within a council or something which is owned within a community, it really depends on the area. The other thing that we're very strong on is business cases and applications for funding. So afterwards, perhaps I can send out some hints and tips around doing that, which will be very important for the Levelling Up Fund. So what I'm intending to do is to go through what the fund actually involves, and then also to look at some hints and tips around that. So I'm just going to make sure I can move my screen on here. Has that worked? Am I still on the opening screen? Sorry. Apologies.
Try using your cursor, Andrew.
Is that it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Sorry. So the very first thing about levelling up, I think, which everybody knows now, is that it's going to be one of the key driving forces behind the government's domestic agenda as we recover from COVID-19. It's talked about a lot, and there are a number of different funds and ideas around this, but the Levelling Up Fund is the central piece of that. It is very focused on reducing inequalities, and I think something that we've noticed is that most governments up until this point actually have dealt with the issue of inequalities on a very individual basis. So within regions, being quite granular within regions, this fund takes a different approach in that it is looking at not just regions, but also areas within regions. So it's a different approach, which, as you will have seen if you've looked at any of the Levelling Up prospectus and the information on different council areas, which has come alongside it, that the government has categorised areas at a district level or a single tier authority level in terms of how it assesses their need for levelling up. So it is area based rather than individual based, which I think is an interesting thing which we all need to be cognizant of. It's a £4.8 billion fund, which includes 600 million to be spent or allocated in this current incoming financial year. So it is a substantial fund. And I think also a key thing is it's not just about the physical infrastructure, roads, railway stations, it's about social infrastructure as well, which, as I continue, you will see plays very much into the library space. The first round of the fund, they've identified 3 themes, and all of this information is available through the Levelling Up prospectus, which is very accessible on a quick Google or whatever your preferred search engine is. The first round is around transport investments, which is less relevant here, but the second 2 are very relevant, and I'm going to say a bit more about those later. But regeneration and town centre investment, and also cultural and heritage investment. So libraries as a cornerstone local institution can play a really big part here. Local authorities can bid for grants of up to £20 million each per project. Now, the way it's organised is a little bit confusing because the maximum number of bids is to do with MPs. So some councils will just have 1 MP, in which case that's very tidy, and that council can have 1 successful bid. Other councils, which are larger, might have 2 or 3 MPs. So each MP gets to support a bid, essentially. So I think when we're talking about how this works, it'll be really important to bear in mind the importance of your local MP. Expected contributions. So whilst most of the funding will come from the central government pot, if you there is a minimum expectation that a local area through some other funding source would provide a contribution of at least 10%. And obviously, if you can show funding for a larger amount than that, it's potentially a stronger bid, but it has to be at least 10%. Now, something I mentioned earlier on was this list of prioritized areas. So that's available alongside the Levelling Up prospectus, and essentially it goes through every council. So it's either a district or a single tier unitary or metropolitan borough, and it's allocated them all into tiers 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the government's assessment of need. Now, you may have read in the papers recently a bit of let's say discussion around how exactly the government did that. It seems that things like transport distances played a big role. So that's worth having a look at to see where your own council area lies. The Levelling Up Fund will be in a number of rounds. So the first round, the deadline is the 18th of June, and that's really only time for projects that are quite well developed at this stage. So shovel ready is what the government call it, although not all the projects will require a shovel, but that's the kind of term that people use. There is a deadline for spending the funding by the 31st of March 2024. So for some of the smaller projects, that's fine. For some of the larger schemes, they will extend that a little bit. So it's just worth bearing in mind that if you do have a plan, that the sooner you can demonstrate that it will be completed, that again makes it stronger. What we don't know yet is the exact format of the application process. So I personally thought by the time we were having this this discussion, we might know, but we don't yet, which is absolutely fine. But there will be some sort of template issued to councils that will be very, very clear in exactly what your application needs to involve. But what they have said is that it will be very consistent with the Treasury's Green Book. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. It would be absolutely understandable if you weren't. But the government has a standard way of producing business cases, which is known as the 5-case model, which I'm going to talk about just a little bit in a second. But that's all about how the government assesses bids for funding. So the shape and content of that template will be absolutely key. And then the final point here is that for bids from round 2 onwards, each area which is in category 1, so it's that list of councils which is classed as category 1, each of those councils will be allocated a flat fee of 125,000 to support their bid. And that's pretty key to keep that in mind. So key elements of a strong bid. It must have a clear link to an overarching government strategy. So the good thing about libraries is that this government is very enthusiastic about libraries, and in particular, I don't know if any of you saw the report called "Leveling Up Our Communities," produced by Danny Kruger, who's one of the Conservative backbench MPs. He's particularly influential and a really big fan of libraries, and it's worth reading that report, because it does talk a lot about libraries and their importance. So libraries have a very clear link to an overarching priority. They should be ambitious. One of the things that the government have realised, the Treasury have realised, is that their previous ways of assessing applications for funding were quite restrictive and really prioritised things which were very easy to allocate financial benefits to. And they realised that that was really constraining ambition. So they're much more comfortable now, at least they say they are within the guidance, about ideas which are more socially focused and more transformative of an area that it's maybe a little bit more difficult to allocate an exact pounds and pence benefit to. So it's worth having that in mind as well. It needs to demonstrate how it will support people and communities as well as economic development. I think for libraries, this is a real strength. Local support has to have the council support and the support of a local MP. So it will be really important to have that. It should have robust funding modelling. That's obvious. These bids will be looked at by Treasury officials, and they will want to see that the sums add up. And it should be straightforward, clear, precise, easy to read. The government did a review on their business case processes just before Christmas, and one of the key findings was that some of the business cases they received, even after reading it a couple of times, it was really difficult just to pin down exactly what the core idea was. So, never lose it's like a good book or a good story. It needs to have a clear, what is this about? And a business case is absolutely no different. And then very, very key is that if we take politics into this for a second, the government are obviously very keen to see as many of these projects completed in time for the next election. That's just the honest truth of it. So very clear commitment to seeing your project implemented, I think is key. And there's one more thing which I haven't got a bullet point for here, but that is the fact that a single bid for an area can have a number of different elements to it. So as long as there's an overarching joining theme, the library element of it doesn't necessarily have to be the whole thing. So it could well be that some of your conversations that you have with councils, with your parent bodies and also MPs could be about the library element of it forming a part of that overall bid. So within the prospectus, there's very clear guidance around how to package that up if your council is looking at doing a bid with a number of different elements to it. So it's not, you know, so I would push back against the powers that be if they're saying, well, we don't want to spend all of this on the library service. I think your response, at least based on the information we have right now, would be, well, it doesn't all have to be on the library. So there's definitely a way to keep that discussion going. Okay. Just a little bit on, sorry, let me just bring this up. So you don't need to understand this too much right now, but just to give you a very brief overview of what the elements of a business case are. So it's clear that the application process will be grounded in the 5-case business model, and you'll see that there are 5 cases there. But it's not clear just exactly how closely linked it will be. But just to give you an idea, a really good business case needs to have a strategic case. So that's the one at the top there. Is there a compelling case for change? Is there a link to a government priority? Why is this proposal the best option, etc.? Then you consider your economic case, which is all about value for money and social value. So can you show that this investment will give a return in terms of added benefit to an area or economic benefit? The commercial case is to do with contracting and is there any procurement needed? So how will your council's procurement department or legal department handle any partnerships which are needed? The financial case is the most obvious one, probably. That's all about the numbers, how much will be needed in the investment, what will it be spent on, over what number of years will it be spent, what sort of return will it see. And then the management case is all about how you will practically do it. So what sort of project management resources will you need? Usual things that you would do as a project manager around risk assessment, and then really important, the exit strategy. So these are intended to be programs which will end at some point and will leave an area with a new building, a new asset, a new service, or something like that. Okay, and then finally, just wanted to pull out a couple of bits from the prospectus itself. So if you remember back to when I started, there are three areas. The first one is transport, which I don't believe is particularly relevant, but this is the exact wording from the prospectus on the second two priority areas. So regeneration and town centre investment. It talks about secure community infrastructure and about bringing public services and safe community spaces into town and city centres. That's absolutely core libraries territory there, as is cultural investment. So, I mean, I've underlined all of that. Maintaining, regenerating, or creatively repurposing museums, galleries, visitor attractions, associated green spaces, heritage assets, as well as creating new community-owned spaces to support the arts and serve as cultural spaces. So couldn't be a clearer link, I don't think, to libraries and what libraries can bring. So that's everything. That's everything I was going to say in my piece. Very happy to be a part of the wider discussion later on. Thanks, Ian.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. And it's obviously just fantastic opportunities potentially for libraries as well, not just in terms of, I think, being part of those bids, but I think also the supporting some of the bids that are already in as well. So if there's bids going in, which might be for transport and things like that, whether there is stuff that libraries on a smaller level could do in terms of getting engaged in local consultation and managing that kind of aspect of it as well. So that's brilliant. Thank you. And Sam's going to talk to us about her experience with the Towns Fund in Bolton, and I can't see her on the screen. Oh, yes, there she is. All right, Sam, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share a presentation that's got a few images on it. And can everybody see the presentation and hear me okay? Great, thank you. Yeah, so my name's Sam Elliott. I'm the head of service for Bolton's libraries, museums, archives and aquarium. I'm a pretty new head of service. I've been in post a year, so it's all been about COVID up until now. And I've worked in libraries and museums for a long time, but I would say I've probably got more of a traditional museums background rather than libraries. If anyone doesn't know, Bolton's been successful in getting their town deal, which is we've received just over £20 million for various projects to be delivered in Bolton. One of the big projects is a new redeveloped central library, museum, archive and aquarium space in Bolton's town centre. And it is a big part of Bolton's plans for regeneration going forward. So there are lots of other regeneration projects happening in Bolton at the moment, and lots of plans, and this forms a part of that plan. So as a service, our mission is to share and shape our collections, knowledge and spaces with and for everyone. And this underpins everything that we do as a joint service. And I say joint service because we are a joint library and museum service. So we share all the same staff. We're one cultural organisation. And the reason why I highlight that is because I think that is of great benefit when we talk to our council colleagues about the value of culture and what we can contribute to the town with culture. So we've been successful with our Towns Fund bid. We're really excited about that, and I thought that I would just share a few images with you on very early designs and just talk through what our project is. And then I thought I would use this opportunity to talk about the kind of conversations that I think you should be having with the local authority, the strategic management within the local authority, to start thinking about a levelling up fund bid, whether that's for June or later on. So Bolton's Towns Fund bid, like I said, it will be for a new central redevelopment of central library, museum and aquarium. So we've got some very early designs there, and what our business case that we put together for Towns Fund, we looked at how our customers are using us, and I think this is really important when you start shaping a really large bid. You have to be very brave and think about actually how are our customers using our spaces now and how will they use us in the future. So if you walked into Bolton Library right now, the whole, I would say 90% of the space is taken up by books. And actually, when we've looked at the data, probably a third of our customers are using us for book borrowing. So our Towns Fund bid was about transforming that library space to better reflect how our customers are using us. And so we've really thought about how we contribute to wider agendas such as, you know, the skills agenda, health and well-being, economic growth, digital and so on. And that will be better reflected in the design of this building. And that was really what the business case was written about. It had to link up with the government's priority agendas, and that's what our business case did. So we'll have a new children's library as well. It's really exciting, and in this area we're going to really think about how children physically experience a library as well as mentally in terms of reading. And I'll just show you some quick images. I mean, I know this is a libraries webinar, but we will have a redeveloped aquarium as well and a redeveloped museum space. So I'll just stop sharing that screen. So some of the conversations that I've been having with the local authority, I would say, because Andrew gave a fantastic presentation then, when you're involved in big capital projects such as Towns Fund or Levelling Up, a local authority will in general bring in a company like Andrew's to pull together a business case. So I wouldn't want anyone to think that they would, if they were thinking about a big library project, it would be their responsibility to pull together a business case like that. Actually, an external company would more than likely do that for you. But in order for that business case to be pulled together, we almost need to get our house in order, really, to understand what information we're going to put through to that business case. So I think that now is the right time to start thinking about what ideas are we going to contribute to a bid, and is it one big bid where for one big library within your town or your city, or would you pull together almost like a neighbourhood bid? So there's something in there about roads and infrastructure, there's something in there about culture and so on. And I think it's really important to start having these conversations. Now, I know in Bolton, they're already having the conversation about what will go into their levelling up bid in June. And so if you were thinking that there's a shovel ready project now, or there's something that you can attach onto, those conversations are happening now, and the time frame is very, very tight. So I would definitely have those conversations now. The other thing, I've been in conversation with other cultural partners about this subject, and I think that something that we have to recognise is that libraries are a very local authority controlled organisations, and naturally we can be introverts, and actually this is the time to be extroverted and to have that positive, exciting conversation about libraries. And so I think that with big funding pots like this, we run the risk of other cultural organisations that are not run by local authorities. So, for example, theatres, museums, music venues and so on, they often have more direct access to the strategic management within the local authority than we would as service managers. And so this is the time to be a little bit more cheeky, to get our story straight in terms of what we want our service to be, and actually to push those ideas forward to the strategic management in the local authority. Because trust me, other cultural organisations are not in great financial positions at the moment, and they are looking for any kind of funding that they can get in order to survive, just like us, but they have better access and they have almost a better story to tell because they're better at telling those stories. So for me, one of the things I learned when I've worked on recent big capital projects is actually thinking about how can we make this exciting? How do we share this story? How do we sell it? How do we get it in a certain order to be able to sell it to the strategic management? One of the ways that we did that was through social media. So I know that lots of councils have issues with this, but I've recently worked on a big museum redevelopment that's been really successful. And we let the staff share their experience of the project on social media with no restrictions. No one was monitoring their content and so on. And it was really, really popular because we didn't have a marketing budget or any kind of marketing support, but actually that free social media platforms really sold the project and the public fell in love with it. I mean, the one thing that libraries, the biggest thing that libraries have got going for them is that the public back them and politicians back them as well. And actually, think about your members and your portfolio holders and so on, and get them to sell your service for you. If you cannot get access to those strategic managers, think about who does get access and how can you push the narrative their way. And I think that now is the time to start thinking about what, the clear outcomes and objectives you want to get from your library service. So when I spoke to those external people who pull together Bolton's business case for a towns fund, they really can do all the hard work. So looking at Andrew's presentation that he gave before, they are fantastic at pulling together these really succinct kind of business cases for our projects. But what they want to know is, what do we do as a service, and how can they change, mold that narrative into how does it hit those government agendas? So I would say have your data ready to show what you can do and what the potential is. Pull together all that evidence and really have that story ready to take forward. And I would also say that libraries, this network of libraries and heads of service is so useful. So when we talk about having shovel ready projects, you might not have shovel-ready projects within your own local authority area, but this network is so tight-knit that there will be examples of similar sized projects that we can share with each other as a service network. And actually, I think that don't start a project from scratch and think, right, we don't know what a budget would be, we don't know how we'd fund it going forward, we don't know how much staffing we would need. Definitely within this network, there will be somebody who has pulled a project together like that already. And if you can take that to your strategic managers or to the people pulling together a business case, that's the point. Take it to them, give them the answer, and that's what I would do. And then I would have a serious think about, having recently completed a big capital project, I would have a really serious think about how will you run this project going forward. So we all know the pressures on local authorities at the moment in terms of budgets. Are you redeveloping a space where are you expecting to see the same number of people come through the door, or are you expecting for that to grow? Are you expecting your staff to have different skills going forward so they can meet the need of your customers? All these things need thinking about and putting into the business plan as well. Read that prospectus, read it inside and out. Libraries absolutely fit into all of the priorities. There's a phrase that's used throughout it that says the fund is about bringing people together and strengthening communities. And I think that absolutely that is what libraries do. There are a few questions in the chat from earlier that I could probably answer. So if anyone has got any questions, happy to answer them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. It's so exciting. I'm really frustrated. I left Bolton 2 years ago to move like 30 miles south, and I'm gutted to be missing the new library. But yeah, so if anyone's got questions, we've got a couple of questions from the chat already, but if anyone else has got other questions, then please add them in the chat and we'll bring them out. So Pete Aldridge had a question about whether Towns Fund is a barrier to getting additional levelling up funding.
I can answer that one if you'd like. I mean, yeah, it absolutely isn't. I mean, Sam won't mind me taking Bolton as an example, but Bolton was successful, one of the 44 successful council areas to get Towns Fund funding, but it is also a Category 1 area for levelling up funding. So it's in no way rules you out at all. So yeah, you should certainly not take Towns funding award as in any way a barrier to making an application for levelling up.
I think it depends, doesn't it, whether in a Towns Fund application you've bidded in for a library and you're trying to match fund through levelling up. I think that's the difference. So if they're completely separate projects, then yes, you can use both. So
yeah, sorry, of course. I mean, if you've already bid for your major library project and have been awarded funding, then yeah, it would need to be something different. But yeah, I don't actually know how many of the 44 Towns Fund applications were associated with libraries, but I can't imagine it's too many of them.
So to give you an example from Bolton, we received £6.5 million from Towns Fund, but really, in order to deliver the project that we want to deliver, we probably need to spend between 8 to 10 million. And so one of the questions I asked about levelling up fund was, can we use it as match funding to bring that total amount up? And the answer was no. But it doesn't mean to say that if we wanted to, our Towns Fund funding is for a project in the town centre, but if there was another project in one of our district areas that was being looked at, it doesn't mean to say that a library couldn't be included in that project elsewhere.
Brilliant. So just picking up on Peter's response in the chat there, he's saying a large part of the Towns Fund was the Central Library, so it sounds like they're ruled out, but it sounds like you're not ruled out. You're only ruled out for applications around that central library, but you might want to look at some of the other library sites or different library services that might fit. Porrick McKenna has asked a question which I think is a difficult one to answer. Is there likely to be a regional aspect to a successful bid or a political aspect, e.g. a red county or a solid blue county? And obviously with the MPs being involved in this as essentially sponsors of each bid, that adds an extra level of complexity, doesn't it?
Do you want me to take a swing at that one? Okay, fine. Yeah. So I think when levelling up, much like Towns Fund was first talked about, it was criticised because it was seen as being very overtly political. You know, aimed at the former Labour seats in the Midlands and North that had now turned Conservative. But actually, I mean, look, I think there's no avoiding that this government is very political and will probably continue to be. But when you look at the Category 1 areas, they're much more broadly spread across the country now. You know, I was really surprised, for instance, to see that Kent, it has 12 districts. Now, you would have thought with the original rhetoric about levelling up that Kent was not really what it was going to be aimed at, but actually 6 of the 12 districts within Kent have somehow managed to get into Category 1. Now, there's definitely some politics at play there. I mean, so on your question about regional, I think that the Treasury will definitely want to see a spread of you know, successful bids from around the country. I think if it ended up being regions where there was a really low success rate, then that would pose questions. But the truth is, we haven't actually seen the application pack and the detail on criteria. So it's really hard to answer that question, other than I've been surprised already at how the areas have been categorized. So
I suppose just coming out of that, does that also suggest that some of the projects that might be more likely to go are the ones that are going to have a big physical impact, or something big that is going to be really obvious to people when they're walking through the town centre and things like that?
And that the MP can stand next to in a couple of years and open with a pair of scissors and it to be ready in time for the next general election, to be perfectly frank. Yeah, I mean, and a library is the absolute, you know, perfect thing. So, you know, whether or not in the background there are politics at play here, you know, there's a real opportunity.
There's a fantastic opportunity. I mean, we all know about the decline of the high street, and I think that you know, we've talked in the past about libraries being a stable place on the high street, and that we will still be there, and we're a big part of recovery from COVID as well. And I think that there's a great story to talk about there, and that actually, you know, whether it's a high street or whether it's a neighbourhood, we are a great stable institution.
Yeah.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you. And we've got Carla Nitti just saying, authority covers a large area, much of it is rural, and looking at the possibility of a library being part of a larger bid, do you think multiple libraries in different towns within constituency could be included in a bid?
Yeah. Sam, do you want me to have a go? Do you want to? Okay, I'll go. Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing that says it can only be one library if there are multiple libraries within the same area. Nothing at all to limit that, as far as I can see so far. I mean, Sam, was your Towns Fund one, was that a single library or was that a number of libraries?
It is a single library, but I wonder whether here there is something that can be done. I mean, in Bolton we have a cultural leadership group where all the kind of, you know, the cultural partners come together, especially those in the town centre. And I wonder if there's something that could be done with cultural partners across a geographic area to put in a joint bid, a strong, you know, joint bid rather than solely libraries, because I think there is a great strategic story that can be told about the power of culture in general, as well as standalone library projects.
Yeah, and just the other thing to,
and they may be, sorry, they may be better at helping get our story across as well to
Yeah, and just the other thing to add, which I don't think I made clear earlier, which I should have done, there is an initial round one deadline for the 18th of June, but if you've got something that's going to take a bit longer to work out, then there will be other deadlines, and those other deadlines, if you're a priority one area, will attract that support funding as well. So you know, it's a decision for you to make. If you're not a category one area, then I personally think that there may be some advantage if you're ready to go in getting a bid in early. But if you are priority one and it's going to take a bit more time to work out, then take that time, put the work in, use that extra resource to, you know, as Sam said, you know, get your ducks in a row.
So for category one, get it right, and for categories 2 and 3, get it in as soon as possible.
I'd hate to say. Well, I suppose I did say that, but I'm not. It's not. I'm a bit nervous at you summarising it like that. But that, I think, is probably not bad advice. You know,
I mean, I would say as well that we've all worked on various sizes of capital projects before for libraries, and we've, you know, used the network. So I would be happy to share, you know, costings that we've pulled together for our central library, you know, for a similar size library. I wouldn't start from scratch. So, you know, I'm a bit nervous about saying it, but I would say put something in and, you know, refine it later on. I would say, you know, get something in, use your experience of past projects to help pull that project together, and get it in.
Brilliant. Thank you. And then Karen Gibbons, I understand Swansea is a priority one area. Are there any differences in the scope of applications from Wales, and should we focus on Welsh Government priorities or central government priorities?
There's a huge amount of controversy around this, particularly in Wales. I think the interesting thing about this fund is that central government wants to have a direct relationship with councils and districts and local authorities. It doesn't seem to be involving the devolved administrations at all. I think it's fair to say. So the priority, I mean, I think it's really important to show how your council's objectives fit within the devolved administration, but the Treasury is going to be assessing these in terms of how they fit with their own central government priorities, especially. This is part of the government's push to show that it's a united kingdom as well, you know, for other political reasons. So there is politics at play here, unfortunately, but I mean, I know from conversations I've had, particularly in Wales, there is a lot of quite reasonable upset about that.
Brilliant. And presumably that's going to be even more of a challenge in Scotland, where the devolved government's priorities could be further diverged from the UK government.
Yeah.
So we've got a question from Sam for Sam in the chat. Who were the key people you had to get on site to ensure the library was on the radar for development planning? And was there like a top 3 or 4 people you targeted?
Yes. So the political leadership, number one. So we've had 2 administrations in Bolton in recent years. So you know, you think you've got one, and then you have to you know, work with another administration, and both administrations in Bolton have been very supportive of libraries and museums. So the political administration is one. The second, I would say, is the economic and regeneration team. They're the second. The third is we have a department in place and the director in there. And then the fourth, I would say, is it's it's your own portfolio holder. So within a local authority, we would sit under a particular councillor who has a portfolio for our area, and it's not always obvious where you sit within a council. So to give you an example, in Bolton, we sit with waste and neighbourhoods and bereavement services and so on, and so culture doesn't always come naturally to a member, but actually we're the good news story, really. And I think that when members are dealing with quite serious, often very challenging situations within local authorities, we can be the good news story. And that's what politicians want. They want good news stories that they can share with their communities. And libraries are very political, whether it's the public that back them or whether it's the local politicians that back them. We must use that in a better way.
And just looping back to what you were saying before about using social media and things like that to start to convey those messages, it sounds like you've gone quite a kind of holistic way of trying to approach those people. So obviously directly to them, but then also using channels through the public sphere.
Well, that's right, Ian, because I would never get access to the leader of the council in the same way that I would get that they would read my social media posts. So I just gave the staff free rein to actually share our work and our project, and we didn't quite know how that would come off, but actually on this last capital project that we worked on, the public, the communities really bought into it. And I think when you have community backing like that, the politicians can't ignore it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Is there anything you'd add to that, Andrew, as well?
No, that really, I can't add anything. That's a great answer.
Okay. And then we've got Heather just asking about priority areas being decided. I think, did we cover that? There is a bit more.
Is this the categories, the different No, I mean, it's a really long list. So, I mean, I'm sure we can send the link. It's actually on the same page as the prospectus, which I think Isabel might have sent the link around.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's on that link that Isabel sent round. It's an Excel spreadsheet of categorized areas is on that same page.
Brilliant, thank you. Are there any other questions that people have? I think particularly people who are considering doing a bid for this first round. It'd be really interesting to, I suppose, first of all, just get a sense of if people are starting to think concretely about how they might put in a bid for the first round.
One thing I would say about that, Ian, is just in general for libraries, and this is something that I'm learning, that it's great. It's always better to have, if you have your kind of business plan as an organisation ready. Yeah. These projects that come along, Towns Fund, Levelling Up and so on, it is much easier to start a bid, especially if you have to react very quickly like this bid in terms of levelling up. And I think sometimes as libraries, and this is Bolton as well, so it's me included, we're not always ready to go. And I think that's because we're very operational services, we're very transactional, and because that's what we've always done. But actually, having a business plan ready, having the ideas ready, having the contacts in place can help you be more reactive to situations like this.
Yeah.
And actually this last year has forced us into a position of just operational focus, hasn't it? Of opening services, closing services, adding extra services, trying to work out how to deliver services outside the building. And so it's almost like we've been operating outside the business plan for the last year, and so trying to get back into that and trying to pull something into that. So Louise has just asked if there's specific individuals for a further discussion. I suspect, I don't want to offer your time, Sam, and Andrew,
of course,
you would be happy to, and also you get in touch with me, that'd be fine as well.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to give me a ring and have a chat about our past capital projects and our planned capital projects, please feel free.
Yeah, and just like, I know, I mean, I'm a consultant and everything, but I'm very, very happy to have just no strings attached, just conversations with people, because I'd learn a lot from those as well. So don't feel that there's any commitment there or anything. Just really happy to share what we know, because it's just, I think as an organization, we're really keen to see libraries play a really big part in this. So if even just a phone call for a bit of advice is helpful, I'm very, very happy to do that. But I'm sure Ian will send out some follow-up information, and we've got some guides and things which will help you, in the meantime.
Brilliant. And then we've got another couple of comments. So one from Rachel Levy from City of London. Are they expecting bids from every council regardless of priority level?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they could. There's no expectation there. I think that they want people to bid if they have good ideas. I mean, I think if you're, for instance, a priority 3 area, I think that your bid's going to have to be something really interesting and quite innovative and groundbreaking, so that it might actually be a pilot that other places could learn from. It's going to have to be a strong case for it. But if for some reason, and I doubt this would happen, not enough priority 1 and 2 areas bid and they have funding left over, they are going to want to allocate that. So if you've got an idea, put a bid in. And you just never know, because your local MP might be particularly good at lobbying behind the scenes to get something done, regardless of what category you are. So I wouldn't just take it as a don't bother if you're category 3. Particularly if you've got a project that you can show that you can do quite quickly, and can demonstrate real value there. But yeah, there's no rules as far as I can see.
And then I suppose getting back to what Sam was saying before, just having something in your pocket then as well. So even if you're unsuccessful, you've got it then for the next round of funding, whatever that might be. Freeport seems to be the next one. And then Karen Gibbons, who from Swansea, I'd like to maximise our library outdoor spaces for community use across the whole area, as well as improving some small buildings with extensions or co-location with others, which from my perspective sounds absolutely ideal. For this fund.
I think there's some real potential there to bring in other cultural partners too, and I think that would strengthen a bid actually.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Are there any more questions before we go to a final comment from Andrew and Sam? Well, so I suppose just pulling it together. I mean, the big things I think from me to take away from this is from what Andrew and Sam are both saying, get onto it now, get a really strong narrative. What's the story and what's the data behind it? Work out how it aligns to existing priorities as well, and make sure it's something that's kind of there. But then one of the critical things really, shovel ready doesn't need to be shovel ready for you. It could be a lift and shift from somewhere else, and kind of use those networks and start to talk through those head service and income generation networks to try and work out if there's ways that we can essentially kind of just sort of nick ideas from others that have really worked and that we can demonstrate work that might apply and work in our own areas as well. So Sam and Andrew, do you want to a couple of words just to finish off? Sam?
Yeah, I mean, for me, just to reiterate, just if there is a project that's ready to go, I would put it in there. I really would think about working with other cultural partners, because I think it strengthens the bid, keeps more partners happy, but also they often have the contacts within the council, the MPs and so on, whereas we don't always have that as local authority officers. And the last thing I would stress is really think about how you will operate going forward, and don't build something that you cannot run going forward. That would be my lasting thought. So really have a good think about it. And I wish everyone well. And if anyone wants to speak to me about past or future capital bids, the good news and the bad news, then do just give me a call. I'll be very honest about it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. And Andrew?
Nothing really from me other than I've really enjoyed hearing Sam's Sam's story, I mean, that's a perfect example of what this type of funding can do. And just to reiterate the offer of a conversation, if people would find it useful, and let's get as many strong library focused bids in as possible, because there is an appetite to support this type of thing. So don't waste the opportunity.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, and that thing of getting as many library bids in round 1 as possible kind of sets the bar for rounds 2 and 3. And so if we can get successful bids in now, then I think that will help everyone else as well in the future as well. So I just want to say thank you both to Sam and Andrew. It's been absolutely brilliant, and I can't believe the hours whizzed past already. And also a final thank you to Arts Council England for supporting us with the Future Funding Programme. And we'll be sending out links to the prospectus, and then also ways to contact Andrew and Sam once we've spoken to them about that first. We won't be emailing around phone numbers without telling you. And also just start discussions on the heads of service network or income generation networks as well, which will then help identify where there's other sources of ideas and examples that have been in place. So thank you all, and hope to see some of you again at the Future Funding webinars. We've got one tomorrow on commissioning, which is on the website if you want to have a look. And if you want to sign up, we can sign up until I think 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. So, thank you.